So welcome to the Golden Ears panel. My name is Emiko. I am the director of marketing for the show. I'm also really excited to be sharing the stage with, three of the most amazing ears on Earth. I can safely say. Three pairs. No, you guys mix in mono. What? It's been a long couple days, gentlemen. It's something that I don't talk about a lot in my role at the show, but it's worth mentioning because we're bridging the gap between music creation to music listening, being an audiophile, high-end audio systems. My day job is actually as a recording artist, and two of these gentlemen are involved, or I should say I'm lucky enough that they're involved with me in that capacity. Tony Braunagel, who is a multi-platinum selling, and yes, you have played on, I mean, you know.
Yes. No, I'm not,
okay,
I'm not saying
you just look like you're about to disapprove of what
I forgot about them. They're so long ago.
There's so many of them. Tony is an award-winning Hall of Fame inducted drummer into the Blues Hall of Fame. He is a producer, right?
Well, not the Blues Hall of Fame, but I'm a blues drummer. I won the award of Blues Drummer of the Year.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Right. He has so many awards I can't keep track of them. He is the drummer for the Robert Cray Band.
No, not with Robert Cray anymore. No, I'm pretty much independent now. I did that. I did Taj Mahal for many. I'm still working with Taj Mahal.
There you go.
Bonnie Raitt for many years.
Right.
Ricky Lee Jones, Eric Burden. We were talking about tons of other artists.
Right, and he's also a producer and is working with a number of wonderfully talented artists and is constantly touring. He's one of the hardest working drummers that I know, and I'm very glad to say, and a little bit scared, that he's been kind enough to play drums on my new record, which actually goes down to the next person. And, well, you were on the records that Taj Mahal won.
Yeah, all of the Grammys that Taj has won, yeah, except for the Keb Mo record that Taj Moore. Other than that, I was on all the other Grammy Award-winning albums that he made, and nominated as well. And then one of them I produced, a live record. It was a Grammy Award-winning record.
This is important because we're going to get into the idea of live recording and how things have changed. Sitting next to Tony is Tommy Faragher, who's a multi-platinum Grammy-nominated producer, songwriter, arranger, musical director. I'm very pleased that you're here because you're my producer, and Tommy's done a number of records with me, or I should say I've done with you a couple of singles that have gone into the top 10 in the UK. So we've made our 30 cents from 14,000 streams, woohoo! Which is
big royalties.
Big royalties right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Thanks, Spotify.
So, yeah, thanks, Spotify, that's right. And Tommy's pedigree includes Dusty Springfield, Taylor Dane, John Lloyd Young, who was, I haven't slept in 2 days.
Tony winning.
Right. He was in Jersey Boys as Frankie Valli. I'm going to see Frankie on the 15th at the Smith Center, actually. And so, he was one of the music producers for the hit Fox TV show Glee that everybody knows and loves. And your version of Katy Perry's Teenage Dream went to #1, didn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, it did. That was pretty awesome,
yeah.
I have to say. And then I haven't had the chance yet, but I will, because I'll pester you till you say yes. Rafa Sardina was with us at the Capitol Studios X Marks the Spot panel. Rafa is a 13-time, see, I got it this time, a 13-time Grammy Award-winning producer, mix engineer, and engineer. And his pedigree is too long to mention, but it's unbelievable. And I want to thank Rafa for coming back because we had a lovely panel with you at Capitol in November. Thank you, the three of you, for being here. Alan Side says he was coming, but I think he got held up upstairs at AGD. So if he saunters in, there is a chair for him. We shall see. But Alan, if you're watching this and you haven't shown up,
He's up there buying everybody's vintage equipment.
Probably. Well, then, you know what? Dinner's on him. So I've committed Alan Sides to buying us all dinner. So I want to ask you, gentlemen, because you've been in production, songwriting, music creation most of your whole lives. How do you feel that your production has changed throughout the years with the advents of new technology?
Well, I will start.
Go, Rafa, go.
I say no. Well, I have to say, to me, it has to do with a different workflow. It has just to do with the workflow, not with the way we actually, and it depends on what stage of the process we're talking about. Because the songwriting process, the pre-production process, many of those aspects of the project are still the same or very, very similar, quite similar. They haven't changed that dramatically. In terms of you still have to be in a room together with somebody else, with the people you are collaborating with most of the time, even though I've even seen like some Skype songwriting sessions, of course, and we all go through that, or pre-production sessions, whatever it might be. But the rest of the process has really changed because the concept of how you accomplish a collaboration has changed, for the good and for the bad. There is a good aspect to it. There is more easy access to other talent, to other people you can collaborate with. But on the other hand, sometimes it is a very fragmented process. And obviously the rest of the process in terms of how it has to do more with the interaction with other people, other colleagues that you work with. Because even in the mix process, very often we do a lot of online mixing, or let's say like broadcast type of mixing, where the client doesn't even show up for the session, but he's connected online and he's listening to a podcast of the mix to accommodate some changes. Right. It's not ideal. I will never consider it to be ideal, but that's what's really happening. Yeah.
Tommy, what about you and your experience?
What was the question again? Say that again. No, I kind of remember part of it, but I don't remember. How have things changed from when we first started?
Yeah.
Radically.
Yes.
I think, the fact that we did experience the old way has helped us to make a transition and incorporate the things that we knew to be important for recording. If I were a newcomer coming into the business now, there would probably be a vacancy of some of the information, some of the inspiration that's so important in the beginning process of making music. So I feel fortunate that I was actually able to to experience that originally, because so much of like what Rafa was saying has to do with collaboration, in being in a room with other people, and then having the feedback immediately on what you're doing. So a lot of times music is made now in such a way that it's just an individual sitting at a computer and he's not able to experience the immediacy of the collaborative stimulation that happens, that occurs. So I think from my point of view, I still incorporate, when I'm working, even by myself, I'm still thinking, what would a bass player do? What would a guitar player do? What would a drummer do? What would how would that all come together in a room with a bunch of people sitting around looking at each other? Because that doesn't happen as much now.
Right. Tony, what about you?
Well, I mean, when we were coming up, I just remember when you asked the question, and I listened to what these other two gentlemen are saying and all their great experiences. I just thought of what it meant to me to come up from that era when we had to go set up microphones and plug them in the wall over there and find a signal, and hopefully it was good. Yeah. And then we didn't really realize that we were getting all these other wonderful things back then, like saturation and ambience and stuff like that. That was like, that was the room, whether it was a good room or a bad room, and we learned to deal with it. And we brought that became a sound, and we kind of molded ourselves and our sounds around all that. And if you look back at vintage recording, it's so much a part of that today we try to still get those types of sounds. That was our indoctrination to that, and all the plugins you can possibly find have got all these things that all they're trying to do is emulate what we tried to get, that we were already getting with a microphone into the wall through a crazy old board that probably had a buzz on it into a tape machine, Right. And we mixed it all down the best we could, and we didn't have any help other than our ears. Yeah. And today we still try to do that with the digital side of it, and I feel very fortunate that I still do live sessions. And I play drums on most of the things I do, but when I don't, I hire a very good drummer that, I can interpret what I'm trying to get him to do, and I get musicians to play all at the same time. And I as a drummer, I get called in to play where I play 10 drum tracks for somebody in one day. Yeah. And I can feel like I'm interacting in my mind, in my imagination, but I don't have what I'm hearing off of the keyboard player or the bass player.
Right.
And so that synergy is not there.
Or even from the producer, if there is one, and if you are just playing, being hired as a musician. Same thing happens even as an engineer. Same thing happens as a mixer. But I think that you touch a point that is very, very important. You said something that it really strikes me, because I do live sessions all the time. Every other week, okay. I'm doing live sessions. Ambience, the understanding of ambience, the understanding of what a room means to the equation, what a room means to the music. Right. I was very fortunate, actually I started, even though I started earlier in Europe, but I started professionally here in the US with Alan Sides, actually, at Ocean Way recording. And that was actually a temple of, talking about ambience. Every other room is just, an amazing example of what great ambience, can add to music. And you molded even your style of playing to the room. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, we don't just play and hope the room works one way or another. We actually interacted with the rooms too, all the time. That's what you do as a musician. That's what you do as an engineer too. Well, you understand that and learn how to capture it.
Let me build on that, Rafa, because that's a really good point for everyone that's here and everybody that's going to be watching this later. The bulk of our attendees are audiophiles. And so when they go home to their high-end audio luxury systems or their vintage hi-fi systems, they're interacting with their room as the listener as well, right? Their room is set with a certain ambience and tuning and sound attenuation. As an engineer, as a producer, as being part of the creative process, is that something that you take into account when you start production? Do you think about how the listener will receive it at the end, as not just the mix and the actual creative side, but do you think about, I wonder if these listeners will have earbuds, surround, Beats, Bose, what's it going to be?
It does lower the bar quite a bit. I think it's when we're in the process of working on recording, I think we're really more interested in capturing what's happening there in the room as opposed to thinking how it's going to be translating in the end. Even though, of course, that's an important aspect to what you do. But I think you just want to honestly capture it as much as possible. And
how do you feel? I know you know Brad Lundy with Trans Audio Group, and Brad is exhibiting here at the show. He's in room 302, I think. He has a set of speakers called ATC loudspeakers, which a lot of the big studios use. And Brad and I had this discussion this morning, and I said, I'm going to pass it along to the Golden Ears panel here. He said, when an audiophile comes into his showroom to look for speakers, they're not looking to hear the music the way that it was produced or the way that the artist meant it. They want to have it enhanced to the way they want to hear it. So it's no longer about you putting out your art. It's about their preference. I guess it's like going to a really fancy steak dinner and then covering it with mayonnaise or ketchup or whatever you want. How do you guys feel about that?
I want reveal. When I hear speakers, I want it to reveal what's going on. I don't want it to color. Although I might have a set of speakers there that colors, and I go, it does sound good, and you get the immediate reward of, yes, those sound fantastic. But then you go back. Let's go back to work on this until we get it right.
And I think that it's really what makes you comfortable, what you're used to. You can recognize what it should sound like on speakers that you're really familiar with. So I think being familiar with what you're dealing with is really important. So I still use N-Stan amps. I mean, same pair that I've had for like 35 years. And it's because I know exactly what I'm getting. I know it's goosing certain frequencies and it's eliminating other frequencies. So I have to compensate for that. But, you know, I think it's what you're familiar with, really.
Yeah,
that's very important.
Rafa, what about? I think you answered this at Capitol, but let's hear your answer again.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between a work speaker and a listening speaker, or a monitoring system, or a working monitoring system. Hopefully, you have a system that is equally good for both tasks. Okay, something that's not far away from each experience.
Right.
Because when we're actually working on music, there are speakers that help us identify specific, problems, or how the ambience is going to sound, or how the reverbs and effects are going to sound. And there are other speakers that sound amazing, but don't allow us to dig in. I don't know how to explain it. It's hard to explain, but I tried many different speakers over my lifetime too. Right. And I come from using the N-stands like everybody else, and I have them. And they're an amazing, wonderful tool to identify things. Like, for example, on an N-stand, even if you are working on urban music, even urban music with an N-stand,
right.
But even if you're working on something with a huge beat, you know where the woofer actually breaks.
Yeah.
You know how loud, where it should actually break, at what loudness. And if it breaks below that loudness, you know that you are doing something wrong. You know that you have too much of 60 hertz or this or that.
Right.
So it's basically like just a measurement tool,
right.
in a way.
Yeah.
It's a bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that we use both type of tools.
Yeah.
Like really pleasant, monitoring systems plus the tool-based type of monitoring systems.
Do you feel that there's a loudspeaker that meets in the middle, that can cover both of your needs in that sense?
We are always trying to find that.
The search continues.
Yeah, no, always. Obviously, and there are many wonderful speakers I used over the years and that I love. But you are always in a search. Even if you are content with what you have, you are always on a search. That's the one thing that we're always looking for.
Gotcha. Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask the panel this question, because now we have, I think, whatever was going on upstairs is finally letting out. This show caters largely to the audiophile community. And I think that there's an agreed definition that the audiophile is someone who wants to preserve the most accurate and authentic form of the music from the source to the ear. That being said, building on the last question about the speakers that they hear it on versus what you create it on are two different things. Do you consider yourselves any form of audiophile, partially, completely, not at all, and why or why not?
I come from a different angle. To me, it's all about the respect of what the music is supposed to have, what that song is supposed to have, the emotions, the dynamics, the level of whether I push things and make them lo-fi or whether I make it really pretty and clear. That's more important to me, is to capture those moments and capture the performance of the musicians and the vocalist or the soloist or everybody that has something to really say in the session. To me, I want to capture that the best way, and I let the audiophiles enjoy it or not. It's up to them.
Tommy?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's about capturing the emotion, the spirit of the performance, and making sure that that's being translated more so than technically the clarity of. Sometimes something that's a little obscured can be more interesting. And if you look at the software products, the plugins, like Tony was pointing out, I mean, so many of the plugins that are the most popular are the ones that screw up the sound.
Right.
And it's because in the digital world, it's so crystal clear, it's so precise that it starts to lose some of its humanity, and so you want to bring it back to something that people can relate to on a personal level.
Right. Rafa?
Yeah, I agree. It's more about what's right, not about what's good or bad. I mean, in terms, you are working on music. I mean, we cannot be chasing, the ultimate, piano sound if it doesn't intuitively, provoke you or do something for you, or the song, specifically the song. I mean, and we go through this every day. We have a setup, we have an amazing sound that works for one song and it doesn't work for the next song. With the same player, same setup, same very close style of song, but it simply doesn't cut it. Right. And it has to do with how we connect with the nuances of music and how they project to you. And our role is basically identify that and try to preserve that, to carry it along and hopefully, doesn't get destroyed in the mix either after we have recorded it, which is another aspect that we go through, especially when we are engineering, but we are also producing, or we might also be mixing the project. Yeah. And that process of second guessing yourself is it's an awful one. That's the one that we fight the most.
Have you, speaking of second guessing, have you ever listened to something that you've produced on a high-end like audiophile system and gone, holy crap, that is not what it sounded like in my studio? Has that happened to any of you?
I've taken a couple of things. I've taken some vinyl when I first started working with vinyl again, like in the new age 2.0. That we were in, 2.0. Right. And so I took some vinyl because I wanted to try to get an idea of what everyone was hearing, saying again from digital, because it made completely different sense to me that we were going from tape to vinyl, then now we're going from zeros and ones, to something that turns into vinyl. It's all the same thing statically, or pretty much when you listen to it, but what happens to it when it goes into the back to the analog stage of like being vinyl. And I took it to someone's HiFi home system that was like a $20,000 CD player, you know what I mean, and a $40,000 turntable, right. And I didn't even ask him how much the speakers were, because at that point I'm already realizing that's more than I can afford. And I listened that way, and it was interesting because I want to hear inside of things, and I want something to take me on a further journey than what I'm hearing. If I listen to it, it's like when you're talking about, you compare speakers, you want the speakers to take you a little bit more inside the music than what you get on a car speaker or an NS10M or an earplug or whatever, or earbud or whatever. So I found it was a pretty interesting experience to take the vinyl over there and to listen to it that way. And I went, okay, I guess we're not too shabby, you know what I mean? We're okay. We did a good job. And I asked the person whose system was it. I didn't ask him if he would buy it. I said, "So, you have any questions?" He said, "It seems pretty honest." I went, "That's a good answer right there. I'll take honest."
Fair enough. Tommy, what about you?
Oh, I love vinyl. I just love the way it sounds. I have a whole collection of vinyl records, and I listen to them all the time. It's not something I'm going to be missing because it's a current part of my listening experience. Right.
And do you listen to any of your old productions on vinyl on newer systems, and does it sort of jar you a little bit in terms of the experience?
No, it's exactly what I thought it should sound like.
Amen. Well, then, well done. Really well done to you, Tommy. Rafa, what about you?
Almost every production I do these days, or almost every other project I mix, gets released on vinyl too. So we get vinyl presses all the time. And obviously vinyl is a very fragile format in the sense of the transfer. Specifically, if it's something with a lot of low end and high end, and you work on it, and it's supposed to be a very, especially talking about pop music, very, less dynamic pop music. Right. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Less dynamic pop music.
Right. That's nice.
And that's where it doesn't translate as good as, because, there is a limitation to the format, and there is so much you can do with the transfer. You basically, sometimes you have to remaster. I mean, the ideal thing is to just master it for vinyl. Right. And many people are not doing that. They are just transferring for vinyl, which is very different.
Factor. Yeah.
It is very different. So you don't apply any specific type of curves For vinyl, you just do a tiny, like little fix so it doesn't mess up, the needle doesn't jump and whatnot. That's where I see the distinction between styles of music. You work on a specific types of music that translate amazingly well still to vinyl, but even if you don't purposely master for vinyl, and others that don't. And that's pop music to me. I mean, seriously. I mean, it does happen. It doesn't translate as well because, we're in an age where we have been maximizing levels and dynamics. And even if we don't do it as a producer, engineer, or mixer, we know it's going to get done in mastering, unfortunately, unless we have full control of the mastering process and we have a say on it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Sometimes the record label has the final say. And sometimes it's even the artist that out of insecurity just goes like, no, let's do it that way. Because I'm
because
afraid
they want it to be competitive and be just as loud as the other record.
Absolutely, yeah.
How do you, vinyl. So we all agree vinyl is probably king in a lot of ways.
No, but it's an amazing experience. Vinyl still is. Yeah.
I don't think it ever went away. When people say vinyl is back, I go, well, where did it go? It didn't go away. It's still here. What is your thought? This is a controversial question in the audiophile world, so I want to know. High resolution audio recordings.
Well,
you might have more experience than I.
They're all puzzled.
I've bumped up it against a couple of times, but I don't have direct experience with it. So.
Okay. I'm very biased about it. I think that high resolution audio sounds freaking great. I mean, if you really preserve it, unless you start sampling, downsampling, doing those things like that, then you are screwing things up big time. And that's what happens very often. But yeah, I mean, the whole experience about, playing back a high resolution, comparing apples to apples. This is what doesn't happen very often, people comparing apples to apples. But you have the chance of playing back in a mastering room, your mixes in high resolution, your mixes in a lower resolution. You can really hear the difference. Of course, you can hear the difference. You can hear the immediacy of the music. Depends obviously on how much acoustic contact the music has. Then it's more revealing, the difference. But yeah, of course, there is quite a difference. How many people are gonna spend their money on it? I hope more people do, but it's a market. It's a market.
Yeah, it's a market. It hasn't really taken off, but it is a market.
Even though high resolution audio sales are going up for the past 2 years, like big time, to the point that every major record label is putting an effort on releasing on high resolution.
And do you feel that to the untrained ear, that high resolution audio recordings are easily identifiable in terms of the differences, or do you feel that there's a lot of people out there that are going that way because there's a cool factor to it?
Well, to me, it doesn't matter if we're able to sell more music that way.
Fair enough, Rafa. Tell it like it is. Fair.
You mean that bottom line thing again? Yeah.
Bottom line. There's money to be made. Fair enough. Fair enough. Tommy, you and I do everything inside the box. I have never made a record with you that involves.
That's not true.
No, we did 2 out of the box in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Those were the only 2. But recently, we've been doing everything inside of the box. Totally digital. Totally online only stuff. As a producer, how do you feel about that when you're mixing it, that it's coming from such a synthesized place versus, I mean, the only 2 real humans are you and me in that process. And that's not because it's electronic music. It's just because we're working on a schedule. That's what we have. How do you feel about when you're mixing and you're thinking about the layout of it spatially? Are you hoping that will translate onto whatever the listener's going to be hearing it on?
Well, I think it's always more difficult if you don't record live instruments, because you're dealing with sounds that other people have already become acquainted with, and it's hard to get a unique sound. So if you're using the same piano that's on 20 100,000 other records, or is being used by millions of people, it's not going to be as unique as something that you're in a room and you're recording a piano, and So wherever there's those situations, I think then you really have to try as hard as you can to try to make that somehow a unique experience and make it special. And that's doing things in the box it's hard, because it's harder to be as objective about it, because it's when you first plug in that digital piano and you play it and you go, yeah, that sounds good. But so many sound, like if you're in the real world, a real piano, there's going to be inconsistencies in that piano, and the pianist is going to play into those inconsistencies, and that's going to become part of the sound.
So building on that, do you feel that those inconsistencies and those I don't want to call them flaws, because those characteristics, do you feel like those are things that should be preserved in the music for the listener, or should they be taken out and cleaned?
No.
Flaws are music.
Yeah. You're playing into that. So as a pianist, I'll play into that. Maybe a certain key might it hits a little bit harder, even though you're using the same touch, it attacks differently. Every note on that keyboard has its own unique attack or sound to it. It might even just be a slight mistuning on something. And so you're avoiding that key, or you're,
right.
But in the process, you're creating something that's very unique and has a character to it.
Tony,
you'll see a soloist, for instance, play a piano of a certain type of character piano, and they'll find that note, and if it's in the key they're playing, and they're going to be hitting that note, they're going to go back to it, because it's going to have a different sort of projection, And having nuance and having things that aren't perfect. It goes back to what I said when I as a kid, when I first started recording, probably in my teens and everything. We're still trying to get all those things that happen for us. Like you mentioned, all the plugins that we have basically mess up the sound. We got beautiful, clean signal coming through from digital, and we keep trying to get that analog thing so much that we go back home and listen to our vinyl again. So we get that. We can't get away from that thing that we get fed by that whole sound and the way it hits us and the way it comes to us in the speakers. And we keep turning the speakers up even more and more and more, and it doesn't hurt you. And I get in front of a completely digital mix sometimes, and I have to sit back on the other side of the room and listen to it when I'm trying to figure out if I like it or not, know. Or I turn it up loud and I walk out of the room to other parts of my house, and I'll turn it really loud in my office studio playback room, and I'll go into the other room and just listen and go, oh, okay, it feels good then. And so I'm always looking for that, and I don't, I'm not the greatest. I'm not an engineer, in fact. My engineering qualities are very low, but I like to get things that are a little bit different, and I like for them to have character. So I don't really try to get as technical as some. And I would say that Rafa, with the stuff that you're doing, the pop stuff, and I've heard a lot of it, it's magnificent, But like you say, that bottom end is almost too low to go on in vinyl, and how do you get all that bottom end on vinyl? You can't. It's digital. I did one of the albums I did. It came out last year, and it got nominated for a Grammy this year. And when the guy mastered it, he mastered it digital and to a 15 IPS half-inch as well. So the mastering came out two different ways. Well, myself and the mixing engineer loved the analog of it, but the record label and everybody else, no, we're going to go with the digital, So it's amazing, because they get used to hearing it. And I said, relax, they're both fantastic. One's just easier to listen to than the other.
Which is another aspect that happens quite a lot. To be open to change. Farther on, on a project. You have been working on a project maybe for weeks, maybe for months, maybe for a year, who knows? But to be open to reinterpret things at the very end, that's very hard for some people. Sometimes it's easier for us as producers, but it's hard for the third parties, sometimes including the artist. They have been listening to it for so long in a very specific kind of way, usually in the box, because that's the most convenient way to carry on a project. So when you do some changes at the very end in the final mix, sometimes it strikes people some people the wrong way. Like, oh, really? It changed a lot. You know, it has a different, I don't know, a different vibe. It doesn't make me feel exactly the same. That's the only danger of what we're talking about. We always strive for the best or something that makes us feel more. We're always dealing with just that.
Sure.
Trying to get more emotion somehow out of the music. Nothing else matters. And that's our selling point when we bring change at the end of a project.
Right.
And I usually succeed, but sometimes the battle is too hard with some people. They don't want the change because they're used to.
Yeah.
Two final questions from the moderator, and then I'm going to open it up to questions from the floor, because you have multiple Grammys and I think probably more millions of records sold up here than would fill. We could stack the records to the top of the hotel and it would still be not enough. So I'm sure you're going to want to ask a couple of questions. But the two last questions that I have are, number one, speaking to the audiophile community, because I think there's a lot of audiophiles out there that feel like the music of today and the youth of tomorrow are listening to crap, for lack of a better term. And my question is, well, so then I want to hear what you guys have to say, because I have my own answer in my head, but what can the audiophiles do to help the music industry? What can audiophiles do to help music creators, music producers, mixers? What can they do? That's number one. And number two, what do you hope everyone who hears, what do you hope everyone will take away from hearing your productions? Those are my two questions.
Wow. That's a very large responsibility to answer right there. I guess we can only hope that the audiophiles maybe. What I'm seeing is there was a period, and I can't really put it exactly in years and when it did, because it kind of morphed in and out of it, where I saw young people not studying music as much and not learning how to actually play their instrument. And that's changed back again, where there are tons of wonderful, incredibly wonderful young musicians who are studying, who are becoming monster musicians and monster players. And I don't know if the songwriting is keeping up with that. It is in some ways a compositional side, because for a long period of time it was about songwriters and then all the songs that they wrote, and it was about compositions, and especially 50s, 60s, 70s, those eras. But I see that the playing is coming back, and my point is that if that continues to nurture and grow, and the quality of real music comes back again, then it's likely that the audiophiles will have something more to listen to. If not, then they're going to have to get used to the fact that a lot of things aren't really, they're more programmed, if that's the right word, or whatever, and they're not necessarily real musicians playing them, every instrument. And I know Rafa probably does a lot of both of those things. As you said, you still do a lot of live sessions, and I would just hope that it evolves from this resurgence of young people learning to play their instruments and becoming really good at what they do. To me, that would be a very important thing to see carried on.
So you want audiophiles to take music lessons?
No, they're too old, because they're the ones that can afford to buy them.
I see young people here, Tony. That's not fair.
But are they audiophiles? Can you buy a $50,000 system? Okay. No.
We're building up to it. We're building up to it.
No, that's fantastic. No, listen, in any way that you're inspired to be a part of that, absolutely, And I don't know how, but they should need to open up a line of communication so you can say what you feel about that. I don't know if you can say that to the artist or whatever, But to me, that would be important to see that happen more often than it does today in certain things. I'm biased, clearly. Just put it out in the open. So,
Tommy, how about you?
Well, I think we want the audiophiles to keep asking for great music and the highest quality. There was a period there after 2000, between 2000 and 2010, and MP3s became the standard, and they just sounded horrible. And people were playing them on systems that, with just earbuds, and music, it's almost unlistenable compared to, it's like listening to a 78 record versus a 33 RPM. You know what I mean? It's we have to keep the bar as high as possible, so that music has a priority. It's not just something that's just left to hang there and used on a TV commercial or whatever. I mean, it's too important. It's such a strong part of our culture, and it's such an important part of our lives. It's like the backdrop of my life, that's for sure. And I had growing up with vinyl was a wonderful experience of bringing the album home, look at the back of the album. I get to see who played on it, who engineered it, what recording studio was recorded in, what label it was on. It was more than just listening to a random MP3 on a computer. And I think that the audiophiles have a responsibility to continue to ask the record companies to provide the highest quality that they can provide and not just write it off as.
Would it be fair to say that audiophiles that can afford, say, Bill's Legacy's sound speakers up here should therefore put a little bit of money aside to buy the recording rather than stream it? Because just so everybody knows, I want to make this really clear, artists and 3 producers and songwriters here, every time you stream something on Spotify, Tommy and I split 0.0037 cents per track. I'll say it again, 0.0037 cents divided by 2. Yeah. Are you going to come to Monaco in my yacht this year, or will we go in your yacht this year? So I think that the audiophile it's an opportunity, not just a responsibility. If you want to hear great music keep going, like The Who or the Rolling Stones or The Cure or Janis Joplin or whatever you love, fight back against the record companies. Fight back, use your voice, use your dollars, and say, I'm buying the stuff that I love. And if I discover a new artist, someone that Rafa's working with, Tony's working with a new young teenage girl who's unbelievably talented, go buy her vinyl pressing or her CD or her whatever. That's a way that you can keep it going, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Rafa,
absolutely.
what about you?
Absolutely, I agree. I think that it's a group. We should have some kind of. It's a group effort. It's not just, or we cannot just simplify it as any specific group's responsibilities. Everybody's responsibility. Even me as a buyer, when I really like something, I buy it. I try to find the highest possible resolution version of the project because it does really make a difference to me. And I can hear sometimes you hear more or less of a difference, but it's not just that. It's a matter of supporting, what really matters. Mm-hmm. The real values of why we do this and why we try to do it at the highest possible resolution and level. And it's like when somebody hires you and they go like, I don't have that much money, but I want you to work on my project. Do you think I put less effort in the project because they have less money? Or he does, or he does. No, it doesn't work that way. We put everything into it. I mean, it's more than just a business. Right. It's much more than that. It's a lifestyle. It's some, musical values that we have, and even sonic values that we have, and we're always chasing that magical, moment through music, and it is great if the audiophile community can support that. And by the way, labels are also losing money when you don't buy the hard copy because they make much more money if and subsequently, the artist makes more money. I mean, everybody can afford to make a living.
Right.
Yeah, everybody.
Absolutely. It's an ecosystem at that point. Right?
That is definitely a good way of putting it. The more everybody puts into real music, the better it's going to be. And I thought Spotify takes us on a vacation every year, don't they?
That's only if you sign up
Sorry.
for the $9.99 monthly plan.
Oh, this is a premium. I never got that.
I don't do that. I don't know. Anyway, I would like to thank Rafa Sardina, Tommy Faragher, and Tony Braunagel for being here. I hope you guys found this helpful and eye-opening in terms of it's more than just the system. If you don't have the music to play on the system, you just have a really expensive, nice-looking coffee table or picture stand. That's what it comes down to. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.